Chapter 3 Horrid Henry's Ambush. Christmas Eve. Just a few more hours to go. It was Christmas Eve at last. Every minute felt like an hour. Every hour felt like a year. How could Henry live until Christmas morning when he could get his hands on his lute? Mum and Dad were baking frantically in the kitchen. Perfect Peter sat by the twinkling Christmas tree, scratching out Silent Night over and over again on his cello. "Can't you play something else?" snapped Henry. "No," said Peter, swaying away. "This is the only Christmas carol I know. You can move if you don't like it." "You move," said Henry. Peter ignored him. "Silent Night," screeched the cello. "R." Horrid Henry lay on the sofa with his fingers on his ears, double-checking his choices from the Toy Heaven catalog. Big red X's appeared on every page to help you know who remember all the toys he absolutely have to have. Oh, please, let everything he wanted leap from its pages and into Santa's sack. After all, what could be better than looking at a huge glittering stack of presents on Christmas morning and knowing that they were all for you? Oh, please, let this be the year when he finally got everything he wanted. His letter to Santa Claus couldn't have been clearer. Dear Santa Claus, I want loads and loads and loads of cash to make up for the penny amount you put in my stocking last year, and a Robomatic Supersonic Space Howler Deluxe Plus attachments would be great too. I have asked for this before, you know. And the Terminator Gladiator fighting kit. I need lots more Dayglow slime and comics and a Mutant Max poster and new Zabatron hip-hop dinosaur. This is your last chance. Henry. P.S. Oranges are not presents. P.P.S. Peter asked me to tell you to give me all his presents as he doesn't want any. How hard could it be for Santa to get this right? He'd asked for Space Howler last year, and it never arrived. Instead, Henry got vests, and handkerchiefs, and books, and clothes, and a blue jigsaw puzzle and a jump rope, and a tiny water blaster instead of the mega-sized one he'd specified. Yuck! Santa Claus obviously needed Henry's help. Santa Claus is getting old and doddery, thought Henry. Maybe he hasn't got my letters. Maybe he's lost his reading glasses. Or, what a horrible thought, maybe he was delivering Henry's presents by mistake to some other Henry. Eek! Some yucky, undeserving Henry was probably right now this minute playing with Henry's Terminator, Gladiator sword, shield, and axe and trident, and enjoying his intergalactic samurai gorillas. It was so unfair. And then suddenly Henry had a brilliant, spectacular idea. Why had he never thought of this before? All his present problems would be over. Presents were far too important to leave Santa Claus, since he couldn't be trusted to bring the right gifts. Horrid Henry had no choice. He would have to ambush Santa Claus. Yes, he'd hold Santa Claus hostage with his goose shooter while he rummaged in his present sack for all the loot he was owed. Maybe Henry would keep it all. Now that would be fair. Let's see, thought Horrid Henry. Santa Claus was bound to be a slippery character, so he'd need to booby trap his bedroom. When you know who sneaked in to fill his stocking at the end of the bed. Henry could leap up and nab him. Santa Claus had a lot of explaining to do for all those years of stockings instead of chocolate and cold hard cash. So, how best to capture him, Henry considered. A bucket of water above the door? A jump rope stretched tight across the entrance, guaranteed to trip up intruders. A web of string crisscrossed from bedpost to door and threaded with bells to ensure nighttime visitors. And let's not forget strategically scattered whoopee cushions. His plan was foolproof. Loot, here I come, thought Horrid Henry. Horrid Henry sat up in bed, and his goose shooter aimed at the half-open door where a bucket of water balanced. All his traps were laid. No one was getting in without Henry knowing it. Any minute now, he'd catch Santa Claus and make him pay up. Henry waited and waited and waited. His eyes started to feel heavy, and he closed them for a moment. There was a rustling at Henry's door. Oh my gosh, this was it. Henry lay down and pretended to be asleep. Creak, creak. Horrid Henry reached for his goose shooter. A huge shape loomed in the doorway. Henry braced himself to attack. Doesn't he look sweet when he's asleep? Whispered the shape. What a little snuggle chops, whispered another. Sweet? Snuggle chops? Horrid Henry's fingers itched to let Mom and Dad have it with both barrels. Pow! Splat! Henry could see it now. Mom covered in green goo. Dad covered in green goo. Mom and Dad snatching the goo shooter and wrecking all his plans and throw out all his presents and banning him from TV forever. His fingers felt a little less itchy. Henry lowered his goo shooter. The bucket of water wobbled above the door. Yikes! What if Mom and Dad stepped into his Santa traps? All his hard work ruined. I'm awake, snarled Henry. The shape stepped back. The water stopped wobbling. Go to sleep, hissed Mom. Go to sleep, hissed Dad. What are you doing here? Demanded Henry. Checking on you. Now, said Mom. Now go to sleep or Santa Claus will never come. He'd better, thought Henry. Horrid Henry woke with a jolt. Ah, he'd fallen asleep. How could he? Panting and gasping, Henry switched on the light. Phew, his traps were intact. His stocking was empty. Santa Claus hadn't been yet. Wow, that was lucky. That was incredibly lucky. Henry lay back, his heart pounding. And then Horrid Henry had a terrible thought. What if Santa Claus decided to be spiteful and avoid Henry's bedroom this year? Or what if he'd play a sneaky trick on Henry and fill the stocking downstairs instead? Nah, no way. But wait, when Santa Claus came to Rude Ralph's house, he's always filled the stockings downstairs. Now Henry came to think of it. Moody Margaret always left her stocking downstairs too, hanging from the fireplace, not from the end of her bed, like Henry did. Horrid Henry looked at the clock. It was past midnight. Mom and Dad had forbidden him to go downstairs till morning, on pain of having all his presents taken away and no TV at all day. But this was an emergency. He'd creep downstairs, take a quick peek to make sure he hadn't missed Santa Claus, then be back in bed in a jiffy. No one will ever know, thought Horrid Henry. Henry tiptoed around the whoopee cushions, leaped over the crisscross threads, stepped over the jump rope, and carefully squeezed through his door so as not to disturb the bucket of water. Then he crept downstairs. Sneak, sneak, sneak. Horrid Henry shone his flashlight over the living room. Santa Claus hadn't been. The room was exactly as he'd left it that evening, except for one thing. Henry's light illuminated the Christmas tree, heavy with chocolate Santas and chocolate bells and chocolate reindeer. Mom and Dad must have hung them on the tree after he'd gone to bed. Horrid Henry looked at the chocolates cluttering up the Christmas tree. Shame, thought Horrid Henry, the way those chocolates spoiled the view of all those lovely decorations. You could barely see the baubles and tinsel he and Peter had worked so hard to put on. Hi, Henry, said the chocolate Santas. Don't you want to eat us? Go on, Henry, said the chocolate bells. You know you want to. What are you waiting for, Henry? Urged the chocolate reindeer. What indeed? After all, it was Christmas. Henry took a chocolate Santa or 3 from the side, and then another 2 from the back. Boy, was that the great chocolate, he thought, stuffing them into his mouth. Oops, now the chocolate Santas look a little unbalanced. Better take a few from the front and from the other side to even it up, thought Henry. Then no one will notice there was a few chocolates missing. Henry gobbled and gorged and guzzled. Wow, were those chocolates yummy! The tree looks a bit bare, thought Henry a little while later. Mom had such eagle eyes she might notice that a few, well, all of the chocolates were missing. He'd better hide all those gaps with a few extra baubles, and while he is improving the tree, he could swap that stupid fairy for Terminator Gladiator. Henry piled extra decorations onto the branches. Soon the Christmas tree was so covered in baubles and tinsel there was barely a hint of green. No one would notice the missing chocolates. Then Henry stood on a chair, dumped the fairy, and standing on his tippy toes, hung the Terminator Gladiator at the top where he belonged. Perfect, thought Horrid Henry, jumping off the chair and stepping back to admire his work. Absolutely perfect. Thanks to me, this is the best tree ever. There was a terrible creaking sound, then another, then suddenly, crash, the Christmas tree toppled over. Horrid Henry's heart stopped. Upstairs he could hear Mom and Dad stirring. Hey, who's down there? Shouted Dad. Run, thought Horrid Henry. Run for your life. Horrid Henry ran like he had never run before, up the stairs to his room before Mom and Dad could catch him. Oh, please, let him get there in time. His parents' bedroom door opened just as Henry dashed inside his room. He'd made it. He was safe. Splash! The bucket of water spilled all over him. Trip! Horrid Henry fell over the jump rope. Crash! Smash! Ring, ring! Jangled the bells. Belch your whoopee cushions. What is going on in here? Shrieked Mum, glaring. Nothing, said Horrid Henry as he lay sprawled on the floor, soaking wet, and tangled up in threads and wires and rope. I heard a noise downstairs, so I got up to check, he added innocently. Tree's fallen over, called Dad. Must have been overloaded. Don't worry, I'll fix it. Get back to bed, Henry, said Mum wearily, and don't touch your stocking until morning. Henry looked and gasped. His stocking was stuffed and bulging. That mean old sneak, thought Horrid Henry indignantly. How did he do it? How had he escaped the traps? Wash out Santa Claus, thought Horrid Henry. I'll get you next year.
Chapter 4. Horrid Henry's Christmas Lunch. December 25th, at last. Oh, handkerchiefs, just what I wanted, said Perfect Peter. Thank you so much. Not handkerchiefs again, moaned Horrid Henry, throwing the hankies aside and ripping the paper off the present in his pile. Don't tear the wrapping paper, squeaked Perfect Peter. Horrid Henry ripped open the present and groaned. Yuck, a pen, a pencil, and a ruler. Yuck, a dictionary. Yuck, gloves. Okay, $15 should have been a lot more. Ew, a pink bow tie from Auntie Ruby. Ew, mints. Ew, huge tin of chocolate. Good. 5 more nights for his army. Very good. A subscription to Gross Out fan club. And very, very good. A Terminator Gladiator trident and where was the rest? Is that it? Shrieked Henry. You haven't opened my present, Henry, said Peter. I hope you like it. Henry tore off the wrapping. It was Manners with Maggie's calendar. Ugh, gross, said Henry. No, thank you. Henry, said Mom, that is no way to receive a present. I don't care, moaned Horrid Henry. Where's my Zappatron hip-hop dinosaur? And where's the rest of the Terminator Gladiator fighting kit? I wanted everything, not just the trident. Maybe next year, said Mom. But I want it now, howled Henry. Henry, you know that I want doesn't get, said Peter. Isn't that right, Mom? It certainly is, said Mom. And I haven't heard you say thank you, Henry. Horrid Henry glared at Peter and sprang. He was a hornet stinging a worm to death. Wow, wailed Peter. Henry, stop it or... They're here, shouted Horrid Henry, leaping up and abandoning his prey. That means there's more presents. Wait, Henry, said Mom, but too late. Henry raced to the door and flung it open. There stood Granny and Grandpa, Prissy, Polly, Pimply Paul, and Vomiting Vera. Give me my presents, he shrieked, snatching a bag of brightly wrapped gifts out of Granny's hand and spilling them on the floor. Now, where were the ones with his name on them? Merry Christmas, everyone, said Mom brightly. Henry, don't be rude. I'm not being rude, said Henry. I just want my presents. Great, money, said Henry, beaming. Thanks, Granny, but couldn't you add a few dollars and... Henry, don't be horrid, snapped Dad. Let the guests take off their coats, said Mom. Blah, said Vomiting Vera, throwing up on Paul. Eek, said Polly. All the grown-ups gathered in the living room to open their presents. Peter, thank you so much for the perfume. It's my favorite, said Granny. I know, said Peter. And what a lovely comic, said Granny. Mutant Max is my, favorite. Thank you, Henry, said Grandpa. This comic looks very interesting. I'll have it back when you're finished, said Henry. Henry, said Mom, glaring. For some reason, Polly didn't look delighted with her present. Eek, squeaked Polly. This soap has hairs in it. She pulled out a long black one. That came free, said Horrid Henry. We're getting you toothpaste next year, you little brat, muttered Pimply Paul under his breath. Honestly, there was no pleasing some people, thought Horrid Henry indignantly. He'd given Paul a great bar of soap, and he didn't seem thrilled. So much for it's the thought that counts. A poem, said Mom. Henry, how lovely. Read it aloud, said Grandpa. Dear old wrinkly Mum, don't be glum, 'cause you've got a fat tum and an even bigger... Maybe later, said Mom. Another poem, said Dad. Great. Dear old baldy Dad, and so forth, said Dad, folding Henry's poem quickly. Oh, said Polly, staring at the crystal frog vase Mom and Dad had given her. How funny. This looks just like the vase I gave Auntie Ruby for Christmas last year. Oh, what a coincidence, said Mom, blushing bright red. Great minds think alike, said Dad quickly. Dad gave Mom an iron. Oh, an iron. Just what I wanted, said Mom. Mom gave Dad oven gloves. Oh, oven gloves. Just what I wanted, said Dad. Pimply Paul gave Prissy Polly a huge power drill. Eek! Squeak Polly. What's this? Oh, that's a megawatt super duper Drill-O-Matic 670 XM3, said Paul. And just wait till you see the attachments. You're going to get those for your birthday. Oh, said Polly. Granny gave Grandpa a lovely mug to put his false teeth in. Grandpa gave Granny a shower cap and a jumbo pack of dusters. What super presents, said Mom. Yes, said Perfect Peter. I love every single one of my presents, especially the oranges and walnuts in my stocking. I didn't, said Horrid Henry. Henry, don't be horrid, said Dad. Who'd like a mince pie? Are they homemade or from the store? Asked Henry. Homemade, of course, said Dad. Gross, said Henry. Ooh, said Polly. No, Vera! She squealed as Vera vomited all over the plate. Never mind, said Mom tightly. There's more in the kitchen. Horrid Henry was bored. Horrid Henry was fed up. The presents had all been opened. His parents had made him go on a long, boring walk. Dad had confiscated his Terminator trident when he had speared Peter with it. So what now? Grandma was sitting in the armchair with his pipe snoring, his tinsel crown slipping all over his face. Prissy Polly and Pimply Paul were squabbling over whose turn it was to change Vera's stinky diaper. Eek, said Polly. I did it last. I did, said Paul. Wow, wailed vomiting Vera. Perfect Peter was watching Sammy the Snail slithering about on the TV. Horrid Henry snatched the remote and switched the channels. Hey, I was watching that, protested Peter. Tough, said Henry. Let's see what's on. Tra-la-la-la, eek! Daffy and her dancing daisies. Wait, I want to watch, wailed Peter. Click. And the tension builds as the judge compared tomatoes grown. Click. Wished you a Merry Christmas. We wish you. Click. Chartres Cathedral is one of the wonders. Click. Ha 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 ha. Opera. Click. Why was there nothing good on TV? Just a baby movie about singing cars he'd seen 1,000,000 times already? I'm bored, moaned Henry, and I'm starving. He wandered into the kitchen, which looked like a hurricane had been swept through. When's lunch? I thought we were eating at 2. I'm starving. Soon, said Mom. She looked a little frazzled. There's been a little problem with the oven. So when's lunch? Bellowed Horrid Henry. When it's ready, bellowed Dad. Henry waited, and waited, and waited. When's lunch? Asked Polly. When's lunch? Asked Paul. When's lunch? Asked Peter. As soon as the turkey's cooked, said Dad. He peeked into the oven. He poked the turkey, then he went pale. It's hardly cooked, he whispered. Check the temperature, said Granny. Dad checked. Oops, said Dad. Never mind, we can start with the sprouts, said Mum cheerfully. That's not the right way to do sprouts, said Granny. You're peeling too many of the leaves off. Yes, Mother, said Dad. That's not the right way to make gravy, said Granny. Yes, Mother, said Dad. That's not the right way to make stuffing, said Granny. Yes, Mother, said Dad. That's not the right way to roast potatoes, said Granny. Mother, yelped Dad. Leave me alone. Don't be horrid. I'm not being horrid, said Dad. Come along, Granny. Let's give you a nice drink and leave the chef on his own, said Mum, steering Granny firmly toward the living room. Then she stopped. Is something burning? Asked Mum, sniffing. Dad checked the oven. Not in here. There was a shriek from the living room. It's Grandpa! Shouted Perfect Peter. Everyone ran in. There was Grandpa, asleep in his chair, a thin column of black smoke rising from his arms. His paper crown was drooping over his pipe, was smoking. What? Mumbled Grandpa, as Mum whacked him with her broom. Arg! He gurgled as Dad threw water all over him. When's lunch? Screamed Henry. When it's ready! Screamed Dad. It was dark when Henry's family finally sat down for Christmas lunch. Henry's tummy was rumbling so loud with the hunger, he thought the walls would cave in. Henry and Peter made a dash to grab the seat against the wall furthest from the kitchen. Get off! Shouted Henry. It's my turn to sit here, wailed Peter. Mine! Mine! Slap. Slap! Wah! Screeched Henry. Wow! Wailed Peter. Quiet! Screamed Dad. Mum brought in fresh holly and ivy to decorate the table. Lovely, said Mum, placing the bows all along the center. Very festive, said Granny. I'm starving, wailed Horrid Henry. This isn't Christmas lunch, it's Christmas dinner. Shh, said Grandpa. The turkey was finally cooked, and there were platefuls of stuffing, sprouts, cranberries, gravy, and peas. Smells good, said Granny. Boy, said Grandpa, what a feast. Horrid Henry was so hungry he could eat the tablecloth. Come on, let's eat, he said. Hold on, I'll just get the roast potatoes, said Dad, wearing his new oven gloves. He carried in the steaming hot potatoes in a glass roasting dish and set it in the middle of the table. Voila, said Dad. Now, who wants dark meat and who... What's that crawling? Ah! Screamed Polly. There's spiders everywhere! Millions of tiny spiders were pouring from the holly and crawling all over the food and the table. Don't panic, shouted Pimply Poll, leaping from his chair. I know what to do. But before he could do anything, the glass dish with the roasted potatoes exploded. Crash! Smash! Eek! Screamed Polly. Everyone stared at the slivers of glass that glistened all over the table and the food. Dad sank down in his chair and covered his eyes. Where are we gonna get more food? Whispered Mum. I don't know, muttered Dad. I know, said Horrid Henry. Let's start with Christmas pudding and defrost some pizzas. Dad opened his eyes. Mum opened her eyes. That, said Dad, is a brilliant idea. I really hanker for some pizza, said Grandpa. Me too, said Granny. Henry beamed. It wasn't so often that his ideas were recognized for their brilliance. Merry Christmas, everyone, said Horrid Henry. Merry Christmas. The end. Hope you guys liked it. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. Bye.